Hello, cavers. Today I'm going to talk about Factorio Space Age, and specifically, I want to talk about the space platforms. I imagine that by now you've probably spent some amount of time already playing Space Age, but if you haven't, you might be wondering what the point of them is. So before I talk about my thoughts on the space platforms, let me talk a little bit about why they're even needed. If you just scan the tech tree when you load up Factorio Space Age, it's pretty easy to think that there is no real reason to go into space and that everything can be done in Navius. Navius? I don't know. But there are a few items that can only be made on other planets, as they may require particular ingredients that are only available on those planets, such as lava or most things that come from Gleva. Gleba? Oh man, pronunciation is gonna kill me on this. Or they may require specific conditions that are only present on a particular planet, such as a strong magnetic field or a particular range of pressure. Unlike the base Factorio, there are several building restrictions that are present in Space Age that will force you to build in certain ways to be able to make progress. Although the restrictions in general feel a little artificial, I personally found them to create interesting problems to solve overall. For example, space platforms have one main building restriction. You can't build any containers on the platform, and so the only way to store resources is to put them in the central hub, as well as whatever is sitting on belts or inside manufacturing buildings. It makes sense that as a branch of this restriction, you also can't have logistical bots or towers on the space platform, or construction bots. The hub itself has a somewhat limited amount of storage space, but it can be expanded using storage buildings that you can add on to your platform. In order for these to actually expand the hub, though, they have to be contiguous to each other, and one of them has to touch the hub. And as a final touch, you can only place and retrieve resources from the central hub directly onto the rest of the space platform. Aside from building restrictions, the second way that space platforms are different from the rest of the game is that you are always disembodied when you launch yourself up into a platform. Buildings are built and removed automatically and are pulled directly from the hub storage without needing intervention from you. This effectively works the same way as when you're building from the map with logistical bots. So while you may be disoriented for a moment, you quickly get used to how this works. Additionally, the platforms are, with one probable exception, explicitly made to move from planet to planet. This movement has its own set of problems that need to be solved. To move, you need engines. The engines need to burn fuel to move. And of course, because it's Factorio, you also need oxidizer, since there's no free oxygen floating around in space to allow for a chemical burn to occur. The ingredients for both can be readily created from the floating asteroids you encounter in space, so it's straightforward to make both on the platform. I'll talk more about movement in a moment, but first I want to address the elephant in the room. Because none of this is going to work if you don't have a power source on the platform. The easiest way to get reliable power, and what I suggest that you do for your first few platforms, is to use solar power. You're going to want at least 50 panels, but you can probably use more. Really, once you've built everything you want on your platform, you may as well just plop down more solar cells and batteries on any remaining space. If you run out of power while moving through space, you're not going to be able to fire or load guns, and your platform will be destroyed. So it's important that you have built enough power to cover max usage. So let me just talk a little bit more about the one platform that you're probably not going to want to move around, and that's your source of space science packs. These are made with smelted asteroid bits, so you just need a platform map in space to make them. If you wish to build a dedicated platform that just makes these science packs in orbit, there's no need to make it move, and you're never going to need to outfit it with defensive guns, engines, or the fluid needed to make them run. I expect a lot of people will just leave this research factory stationary in space. Once you're ready to move to a new planet, make sure that you get your character onto the platform, as if they're not on the platform, you will not be able to land on the new planet. The only thing that you can carry up to the platform are your guns and your armor. Everything else must be sent up to the platform via the rocket silo. Now, rocket silos are, of course, their own unique problem, because, of course, they are. Unlike any of the other buildings in Factorio, rocket silos assemble rockets from parts that are built within the silo itself. You simply need to keep feeding it the raw material in the form of plastic, rocket fuel, and processing units. As long as it has enough of these raw materials, the rocket silos will continue assembling rocket pieces until it's made 100 rocket pieces, and then it will create a rocket that will appear on the silo. Even if you're feeding these source materials to the rocket silo continuously, there is still a minimum amount of time required to build all 100 rocket pieces. If you want to minimize the amount of time between rockets, you're going to want to have several rocket silos going at once. You may have noticed the new stat on the hovering text on items that refers to that basically tells you how many items you need to build in order to fill a rocket. Each rocket will take one full rocket stack up to the platforms. If you don't have a full stack, the rocket will wait until it's full, even if a request from a platform is for less than a full stack. Activating movement between planets is done through a central hub. You simply need to add a destination in the same way that train destinations are managed. Keep in mind that if there are multiple destinations, your platform will immediately head to the next one if you don't place some kind of restriction. One that I use a lot is to check to ensure that I have more than 500 bullets in the storage. Now, why would this restriction be necessary, you might be asking? Well, once you've activated movement, you'll quickly run into why you need bullets. Asteroids. Floating around Navios, you'll already have run into the small asteroid version, and these are basically floating resources that you can just catch and process. But out in the space between planets are medium asteroids, and if these hit your platform, they will cause damage. To keep them from hitting your ship, you're going to have to build guns around the perimeter of the ship, concentrated at the front. The main reason you want coverage on the sides at all is possibly the back, is that when you do get to the other planets, there will be medium asteroids that are just drifting around, and they can approach from the sides. I haven't really seen very many approach from the back, but I still put a gun there just in case. What guns you use is mainly a question of power and convenience. I have found that the normal gun turrets and bullets are just fine to deal with medium asteroids of any type. If you use any type of energy gun, you need a serious power source to make them viable. Solar power is probably not going to cut it unless you have a ton of it. I have used the initial starter gun turrets and the initial ammo, mainly because you can easily create those right now out in space. Piercing rounds require copper, and you can't source copper from asteroids at first, so if you want to use them, you'll have to ship them up from rocket silos. Normal bullets work well enough. Heavier platforms need more engines to move at the same speed as lighter platforms, and of course, the more engines you have, the more fuel you also need. Okay, so now I've covered the basics of what you need in order to move between planets. You need power, fuel, and asteroid defense. But what have I found useful to take with me to new planets? Now, the new planets all have their own quirks and they are deserving of their own videos, but there are some items that will be useful everywhere. And in short, here's what I like to take. I like to take a stack each of logistic towers, construction bots, and logistic bots. You may want 2 or 3 stacks of the logistic bots, but you probably don't need more construction bots initially. You're also going to want 1 stack each of logistic chests, although I skipped the green chest personally. I also like to take a full stack of solar power cells and batteries just to get initial power going. Power is an issue that you're going to solve on all the planets. Solar power is enough to get your basics going. Just don't put too many logistic towers down before you have other sources of power. For the initial landing, you're not going to need any gun turrets or ammo. Landing on each planet is safe. You are going to need some kind of weapon on Liba in particular once your basics set up, because you will be attacked. You're going to want 1 or 2 stacks of inserters, depending on how much you want to build initially. I think belt tunnels, and splitters can be nice to have, but they're not absolutely necessary. Keep in mind that stack inserters use a lot of power, but they are certainly nice to have. You're going to need a stack of factories. Just don't put too many down initially until you got your power situation figured out. For your initial landing, you can probably just use whatever factories remain from the stack of factories you sent to your platform just to get manufacturing going on that. For smelters, the same thing. I would just drop whatever smelters you didn't use on your space platform. You can also just build basic smelters down on the ground on all the planets. You're definitely going to need a few chemical plants. I don't know that I would take more than a single stack initially until you figure out how you want to run things. Lastly, a few items that you can easily overlook. You want to take a cargo landing pad with you. When you drop down from the platform onto the planet, you can walk around and find the perfect spot to put down your cargo landing. It doesn't have to go where you land. Keep in mind that where you land is going to be the respawn point though. Anyways, the cargo pad is where all the cargo from the space platform will end up once you build it. You may want to take enough material to build a rocket silo on the ground as well. Without one of these, you can't launch yourself back up into space. Rocket silos are too big to put directly onto the rocket, but you can ship all the building material for one if you want. You're going to want a stack of power substations. This one's easy to forget, but it's going to make your life a lot easier. With these basic starting items, you'll be able to set up enough initial buildings to unlock the tech you need in order to continue manufacturing on those planets. Once you have started building down on the planet, you can command your space platform to go back home and get any additional materials that you feel you need on the new planet. Don't forget that you're going to need to be making basic plastic, rocket fuel, and processing units in order to make new rocket ships. As with trains, you can set up circuits where your space platform travels between planets automatically, picking up and dropping off resources as needed. So, what do I think about space platforms and Space Age? I think Space Age does a really good job of expanding what you can do in Factorio while varying the gameplay enough to make it interesting. It makes sense, and it's very interesting that every single planet has different ways to access certain resources, and that each one provides some resources that are unique to that planet. Figuring out how to make it all work and how to make your factory thrive on each planet is worth your time if you've enjoyed the game at all. Designing and building your space platforms is also something that I enjoyed quite a bit, and I know that I could spend a lot more time on this alone if I had more spare time to play this game. I do have some super minor complaints that all have to do with the game's narrative. So for example, when you crash land on the original planet, why does your original ship look so different from the space platforms and the rockets that you build? I mean, I can make up a reason, but I feel like it could have been interesting if there's been some sort of explanation in the game. Also, the storage restrictions on the space platforms feels a little bit artificial to me, as I mentioned before. I just can't quite suspend my disbelief about why you can't place simple storage containers on the platform. If belts and inserters work without any issue, why then does a simple storage chest not work? But as I said, these are kind of super minor things when compared to the additional thinking and gameplay that Space Age makes possible. Overall, I think that if you enjoyed playing the base Factorio, Space Age is a no-brainer addition, and it just adds new and different things to do. In some ways, the new additions are going to feel a little bit like mod scenarios, but instead of having to load up different scenarios that you play individually, these are all meshed into some kind of super mod that includes several scenarios in the form of individual planets. Either way, it's been a blast to play Space Age, and I look forward to spending more time with it. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.